Take your plate to the garage. The dog needs company anyway. It's getting crowded in here.
Conversation died at every table. 20 heads turned toward the quiet man in flannel, who hadn't yet spoken.
They were waiting. Would he speak? Would he walk away like a scolded dog?
Patrick, it's a party. Can't we just enjoy the meal? You're making everyone uncomfortable.
I'm dead serious. The garage is empty, perfect for a quiet dinner. And the dog won't judge.
Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few pulled out phones, not sure whether to record or look away.
He had weathered droughts, hail, and market crashes, but never a son-in-law like this.
Richard's calloused hands tightened around his plate. Slowly, he pushed back his chair and rose, back ramrod straight. The room was silent now. Only the clink of his knife on the plate echoed. Then, cutting through the stillness, the doorbell rang. Richard froze mid-step. The chime was sharp, deliberate, like a signal he'd been waiting for all evening.
3 weeks ago, he had told Catherine, "If you don't hear from me by 8, come with the folder." He never expected they'd need it.
He set his plate down and walked toward the foyer, the guests parting silently before him.
What? The old man's got a pizza delivery coming? Don't forget to tip, Richard.
Richard didn't flinch. He'd buried children, buried his wife. He would not be baited by a man who whitened teeth for a living. His hand wrapped around the cold brass handle. He opened the door without hesitation.
Good evening, Richard. I trust I'm not too late.
She carried a single leather folder, pressed against her chest like a shield. The guests who had been recording the humiliation now trained their phones on the new arrival.
What's going on here? Who the hell are you?
She looked past Patrick as if he were a piece of furniture. Richard, where would you like me to begin?
Without another word, Catherine walked toward the dining table. The crowd parted, their whispers dying in her wake.
He had chosen her as his attorney precisely for moments like this, when ice in the veins was needed.
Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private party. You can't just storm in and dictate terms.
She ignored him completely. The leather folder landed on the table with a deliberate, soft thud that seemed to echo. Guests craned their necks. Someone let out a shaky breath. Every phone in the room stayed aimed at the table.
Richard, everything is prepared. Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be. Let's show them the truth.
Prepared for what? This is ridiculous, Stephanie. Say something. This is our home.
Catherine's hand rested on the closed folder. She let the silence stretch, a witness to Patrick's helplessness.
Then we open it and let the document speak.
Catherine slid her thumb under the flap. The leather folder opened with a soft crack, the first sound to cut through the silence. According to the deed of trust for this property, Richard H. Reeves retains a 51% ownership interest. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Stephanie's champagne slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor.
This is a fraud. You can't just waltz in here with some phony document and claim my house.
The county recorder's stamp is on file. It's as valid as the ink you signed with 3 years ago.
Patrick snatched his phone from the table, his thumb jabbing the screen. His confidence was already splintering.
Let him call. Catherine and I had prepared for this moment for weeks. There were no more surprises.
Alan, it's Patrick. I need you to come to the house immediately. Some woman is trying to pull a fast one with a fake deed.
Catherine leaned back, arms folded, a faint smile on her lips. She had seen this kind of desperation before. The deed lay face up on the table, the percentage highlighted in yellow. A silent, unanswerable truth. Patrick thumbed the speaker icon. For a long moment, only static. Then his attorney's voice, brittle and distant, confirmed the clause was enforceable.
Alan, you told me there was nothing to worry about. How can this be valid?
Catherine's hand slid another document from the folder, the mortgage transfer agreement. It itemized a single payment, $1.2 million, from Richard's retirement account. The property at 14 Birch Lane was funded in its entirety by Richard H. Reeves. Not a single dollar came from the so-called homeowner. A murmur surged through the room. Phones tilted, capturing Richard's calm and Patrick's crumbling composure. The party had become a tribunal. Stephanie's sobs cut through the murmur. Mascara streaked her cheeks as she turned to her husband, then to her father, unable to meet either's eyes.
Stephanie, say something! This is our home. He can't just take it because he paid for it.
He had paid for her dream and watched it become her cage. Now he had to set her free, even if she hated him for it.
The law doesn't care about feelings, Mr. Bauer. It cares about signed documents and notarized agreements.
The deed and the transfer lay side by side, Patrick's signature on both, and no argument could erase them. He had run out of lies, and everyone knew it.
I was set up. He never told me about this clause. I signed under false pretenses.
The clause was in plain English, Mr. Bauer. You signed it. No one forced your hand.
She drew a final sheet from the folder, a printout of a single video frame. The room tilted forward.
This, however, has nothing to do with property. It's about what you said when you thought no one was watching.
She held up the image, a grainy security camera still, Patrick's sneer frozen, the timestamp reading 8:02 p.m.
The foyer camera captured your exact words, Mr. Bauer. Take your plate to the garage. The dog needs company anyway.
Patrick's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand went limp at his side. His phone, still connected to his attorney, dropped to the floor, the screen cracking on impact.
This footage, combined with the deed, paints a very specific legal picture. One I'm sure you'd rather not have a judge see.
The word legal hung in the air like a blade. For the first time, Patrick looked at Richard, not with contempt, but with fear.
Under Iowa Code Section 99F.2, elder financial abuse, including humiliation intended to deprive, is a felony. The video is admissible.
She laid the printed statute on the table, the text crisp and highlighted.
That's ridiculous. Elder abuse? For a joke?
But his hands shook as he said it, and the sweat on his temple betrayed him.
The statute doesn't require a joke. It requires a pattern of behavior that diminishes the dignity of a person over 65. Yours is documented.
Guests exchanged horrified glances. Some lowered their phones, as if suddenly complicit. Stephanie turned away, unable to look at the man she'd married. The printed statute sat between them, a legal landmine that could blow apart his career, his marriage, his freedom.
You can argue intent in court, but the video won't lie.
The room held its breath. The legal hammer hadn't fallen, but everyone knew it was poised.
You think you can intimidate me? I'll have your license for this. I'll sue you for slander.
Every threat you make is being recorded. The phones are still on. Choose your next words carefully.
She drew a fresh document from the folder and placed it on the table. A quitclaim deed, crisp and unsigned.
This deed transfers your ownership interest entirely. Sign it, and the criminal matter stays between us.
Patrick stared at the document as if it were a live grenade. The pen beside it glittered under the chandelier.
You can't force me. I have rights.
You have the right to a public hearing where this video and your guest's testimony become evidence. Choose.
His eyes swept the room. The guests' faces were stone. Not a single one would speak for him.
What if I just leave? I could walk out right now.
Then I file the complaint tomorrow morning. The choice is yours, but you don't have all night.
Stephanie, look at me. Please, tell them this is a misunderstanding.
But Stephanie only shook her head, her sobs cutting deeper than any words could.
If this went public, the orthodontic board would see the video. His referrals would vanish like morning fog.
Catherine's fingers closed around the pen and pushed it across the table. It stopped just short of Patrick's hand. Patrick's fingers hovered an inch above the pen, as if touching it would make the nightmare real.
Every year of building a practice, every patient he'd charmed, all of it would vanish the moment that video hit a jury.
The guests' phones still glowed, 20 little witnesses. A voice whispered, "Just sign, Patrick." He didn't know who.
Once I file tomorrow morning, the complaint is public record. There will be no taking it back.
Patrick's hand shook as he lowered it toward the pen. The deed, the video, the statute, all of it collapsing into this single act. He looked once more at the guests, then at Richard, and knew he had already lost everything but the clothes on his back. Patrick's hand closed around the pen. The nib touched paper, and he signed with a jagged stroke that crossed the name like a scar. The notary's stamp came down, pressing the seal into the paper with a mechanical click.
His name, his claim, his pride, all reduced to ink and a government stamp.
She shut the folder with a snap. The sound echoed like a cell door closing. Richard pushed away from the wall and began to walk. He had not spoken in 10 minutes. He moved past the guests, past the shattered glass, toward the table he'd been ordered to leave. His plate sat where he'd left it, the steak cold. He picked it up. No one moved. Phones remained raised, recording.
He had not wanted this lesson, but he would not let it be wasted.
He reached the head of the table, the chair that had sat empty all night. He pulled out the chair, the one that had sat empty all night, and eased himself into it. The plate settled beside the signed quitclaim, like a decree. He lifted his knife and fork. The first cut into the cold steak was slow and sure. A single pair of hands began to clap, hesitant, from a distant corner of the room. Another joined, then another, until 20 people were on their feet, applause swelling. Patrick stood frozen near the wall, his mouth half open, his eyes empty. Richard didn't look up. He chewed slowly, as if the applause were only a distant rain. Catherine stepped back, the folder pressed to her chest, a quiet sentinel. Stephanie pushed through the guests, tears streaking her face, but her gaze was fixed on her father with something new, wonder. The room filled with the sound of applause and the steady, methodical scrape of Richard's knife against the plate. The applause gradually died. Guests retrieved coats, pausing to murmur honorifics at Richard's chair. A few tucked business cards into his jacket pocket, as if he were a dignitary.
Daddy, can we talk, please?
Richard raised his palm, not looking at her. His knife kept moving. She froze, a sob catching in her throat.
He'd waited years for her to see Patrick clearly. A few more minutes wouldn't kill her.
The last guests slipped out. The chandelier light seemed harsher, exposing every empty seat. Patrick hadn't moved, his back pressed to the wall like a man waiting for a firing squad. Catherine gave Richard a crisp nod, then slipped out into the night, the folder held close. Silence settled. Only the three of them remained, and a debt that could never be paid in money. Richard speared the last bite of steak, chewed, and let the fork fall against the plate with a deliberate clink. He wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, folded it, and laid it beside the plate.
Stephanie, this house is yours to live in, but not with him.
Stephanie's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping as she took a half-step forward.
Patrick, you have 1 hour to pack a bag. If you're still here at 10, the paperwork Catherine holds moves from a threat to a filing.
Patrick's mouth opened and closed, a dying fish on the carpet.
I won't argue. I won't repeat myself.
He stood, the chair scraping back with the same slow dignity he'd used to rise the first time. The house was his. The night was over, and the only sound was Stephanie's broken, thankful weeping. Patrick moved like a man underwater. He pulled his coat from the hook, the motion slow and mechanical. He didn't look back. His hand found the door handle, turned it and pulled. The door closed with a soft click. Not a slam. It was worse that way. Stephanie's legs gave way. She crumpled into the nearest dining chair, her face buried in her hands.
I'm so sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry I let it happen.
Richard's boots carried him to her side, the heavy step the only reply she needed. He set his hand on her shoulder, calloused, solid, the same hand that had held a plow and a pen.
He wanted to promise her it would be all right, but he had never been a man who lied easily.
Minutes passed, marked only by Stephanie's ragged breathing and the distant tick of the grandfather clock. He did not speak. What was there to say that the quitclaim hadn't already said? 7 days later, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn at Birch Lane. He sent Stephanie a bank check, enough for a condo near the university, not so much she could afford to forget. The rest bought him a white clapboard farmhouse with a wraparound porch and 20 acres of soybeans. He moved in with a single suitcase, his wife's photograph, and the Labrador that had been banished to the garage. That first evening, he sat on the porch swing and watched the sun bleed into the field. He did not speak. The silence was different now, not the silence of humiliation, but of a man who no longer owed anyone an explanation. He looked at Clara's face, the photograph worn soft from years of being carried in his pocket. He traced the edge with his thumb, a ritual he had started the day she died. He never mentioned the dinner again, not to Stephanie, not to Catherine, not to the dog. And every night, when he sat at the head of his own table, the dog at his feet, he remembered that respect isn't given, it's claimed. Months turned. The soybeans grew thigh-high, and the mailbox at the end of the lane held a heavy cream envelope. He sat on the porch swing, the dog's chin on his knee, and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of Catherine's letterhead, a short note, and the recorded quitclaim deed. The quitclaim has been recorded. You are the sole owner. The file is closed. Catherine. The document beneath the note confirmed it. Richard H. Reeves, 100%. He read the words twice, each time letting the silence between the lines settle deeper. The dog lifted its head, sensing a shift, but Richard simply folded the paper along its original crease.
It was done. Not the house, not the money, but the lesson. And the lesson had been learned by all.
He slipped the envelope under his thigh and leaned back into the swing, a quiet smile touching the corners of his mouth. The sun was warm, the soybeans rustled, and for the first time in years, Richard felt the future open before him. Late afternoon at the pond, Richard knelt beside a neighbor's boy, showing him how to hold the rod. The dog watched from the bank, tail sweeping the grass. Evenings, he'd walk the fields with the lab, then sit on the porch, waiting for nothing in particular. One evening, headlights swept up the lane. Stephanie's sedan pulled in slow, as if afraid of the gravel. She stepped out, thinner than before, a grocery bag in one hand.
I brought pie, the kind Mom used to make.
He nodded toward the swing. She sat, leaving a careful gap between them.
Thank you. Not for the house or the money. For showing me what it looks like to stand up.
Richard looked out at the darkening field. His hand found hers, old and calloused over her soft fingers. They didn't need words. The porch held them, and the night came gently. A few mornings later, a familiar sedan rolled up the lane. Catherine never knocked, just walked toward the porch where Richard sat. She settled beside him, accepted the coffee he offered without asking, and set her briefcase aside.
I dropped by to let you know the fallout, Richard. Patrick's practice is hemorrhaging patients since that video hit the local feeds. The orthodontic board opened an investigation. Stephanie filed for divorce last week. He'll be lucky to keep any license.
Richard stared out at the soybeans, took a slow sip, and said nothing. The news hung between them like a feather, weightless.
Rain's coming Thursday. Might get half an inch.
Catherine smiled, a rare thing, and nodded. She understood he had left that battlefield behind. They talked about the weather, the dog's limp, the new tractor the neighbor bought. Not a word more about Patrick. She left as quietly as she came, the crunch of her tires the only goodbye. Richard remained on the swing until dusk, the farmhouse warm behind him, the past finally as distant as the horizon. One Tuesday, Richard drove the old truck back to Birch Lane. The grand house was gone, just leveled dirt and scattered bricks. He stepped out, boots crunching on broken concrete. The garage where he was meant to eat was a memory now.
He could still hear the clink of his knife against that plate, the applause that followed, but it felt like a different lifetime.
He stooped and lifted a single red brick, its surface rough and cold. He turned it over in his palm, weighing it. So much fury had lived in these walls, now just rubble. He let it fall. The brick landed with a hollow thud, sending up a puff of dust.
A man who forgets where he came from is building on sand.
He didn't say it for anyone else, just a truth he'd always known, finally spoken aloud to the wind. He turned and walked back to his truck, not looking back. The past would not follow him to the farmhouse. The door closed, the engine turned, and the old farmer headed home, where the soybeans stood tall and forgiveness had already been planted. The morning of his 70th birthday dawned clear, the farmhouse windows reflecting gold. By noon, trucks lined the lane and laughter spilled from the porch where tables had been pushed together. Stephanie arrived carrying a cake, the frosting slightly lopsided, her smile uncertain but hopeful. The old Labrador lay at Richard's feet beneath the table, a paper party hat elastic strapped around his muzzle. A neighbor's joke caught him off guard, and Richard threw his head back with a laugh that came from deep in his chest. Stephanie's eyes brimmed as she watched him, her own laugh spilling out, surprised and grateful. The dog's tail thumped the boards, knocking his hat askew. No one bothered to fix it. Richard cut the cake carefully, as if it mattered, and handed the first slice to his daughter without ceremony. He ate quietly, the sweetness unfamiliar, but the silence among them was no longer heavy. The party stretched into twilight, the farmhouse glowing warm, and Richard knew he had finally come home. Long after the last truck rumbled down the lane, Richard sat alone on the porch swing, a single lamp glowing behind him. He pulled the worn photograph from his pocket, the edges soft as cloth. For a long moment he studied her face, the eyes that had never wavered.
I think I did right by you, Clara.
The dog at his feet lifted its head and pressed a cold nose into his palm.
He didn't know if dogs understood remorse or redemption, but this one had witnessed both.
He tucked the photograph back into his pocket, close to his heart. The stars were out, a river of light spilling across the sky. He sat there until the chill crept in, then pushed himself up and gave the dog a scratch behind the ears. Tomorrow there would be chores, phone calls, a granddaughter's drawing to put on the fridge. Life, quiet and earned. The following evening, and every evening after, Richard took his seat at the farmhouse table. The meals were simple: meat, potatoes, whatever the garden offered. He ate them in peace. The Labrador settled at his feet, a warm, steady weight against his boots. He never set a place for ghosts. The past was not invited to supper. Of that housewarming dinner, he never spoke another word. Not to Stephanie, not to Catherine, not even to the dog. But the lesson of that night built the quiet architecture of his days. Respect was not a gift. It was carved out of the hardest wood, earned in the smallest moments. The stars came out, a river of light spilling across the sky. He pushed up from the swing and gave the dog a scratch behind the ears. And every night, at the head of the table, the dog at his feet, he remembered that respect isn't given, it's claimed.